justice with mercy through the power of truth without violence. Truth that sought to bring all men and women together as brothers and sisters. Truth spoken in love and mercy that believed the world's conflicts could be reconciled in the power of the human spirit without resorting to violence. Martin never reached the age of 40, being shot by a single rifle bullet just a few months after his 39th birthday. He always knew that martyrdom was the potential price of challenging America's version of racial separation. Try though he may, he could not escape the burden of leadership. In 1954, King left Boston University for the sleepy southern town of Montgomery, Alabama, seeking the peace and quiet of small-town life. While pastor of the relatively small but prominent Dexter Avenue Baptist Church, he hoped to have the time and freedom to complete his doctoral dissertation in philosophy of religion. Within just a few weeks after his dissertation was submitted, however, Rosa Parks' arrest on one of Montgomery's segregated buses thrust him onto the national stage, and he soon found himself selected Time magazine's Man of the Year, even before he was 30 years old. From that moment on, Martin came to symbolize and vocalize the hopes and aspirations of oppressed people all over the planet. The rich Negro spiritual, "We Shall Overcome," became the nonviolent anthem of men and women the world over. The most remarkable aspect of this moral crusade was that he expanded on Gandhi's use of nonviolence and the force of truth to liberate not only the former sons and daughters of slaves, but the sons and daughters of slave owners as well. The message, though essentially spiritual, was nevertheless powerfully political, causing governments to fall, wars to end, and the courts and Congress of the United States to radically expand the human rights vision of the United States Constitution to include the enforcement of new freedoms for the sons and daughters of former African slaves. This same message soon inspired movements for the liberation of women, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, children, and the physically handicapped, and led ultimately to a rising tide of expectations through the globe. Today's New South and the election of 3 sons of the South to the United States presidency can all be attributed to the struggle that he led to fulfill the American dream without resorting to the destruction of either persons or property. For Martin, social justice would not roll in on wings of inevitability, but would come through struggle and sacrifice. His Montgomery speeches helped desegregate city buses. In Birmingham and at the Lincoln Memorial, his speeches sparked the passage of the National Civil Rights Act of 1964, putting an end to legal segregation of the races. In Selma, he called successfully for the right to vote. 2 years later, his condemnation of the war in Vietnam was instrumental in ending America's involvement in that conflict. And in 1968, he was killed, working with sanitation workers in Memphis to put an end to their poverty, which persisted even though they worked 40 to 50 hours a week. This program is a unique way to listen to and understand history from its primary sources. These speeches grew out of and helped to shape the moral challenges of the second half of the 20th century. This marvelous audio compilation of his words and witness were each tied to specific challenges of injustice. He never sought a confrontation with evil. He was essentially a husband, father, and pastor of the Baptist Church, as were his father and grandfather before him. Events in the American South and Southern Africa, as well as the relatively peaceful democratic transformation of Eastern Europe, have proved him right in seeing nonviolence as the best way to resolve the world's problems, while the conflicts from Bosnia to Liberia continue to prove the futility of violence.